Good morning, everybody. How you guys doing today? Good. A little more thawed, hopefully. I'm just going to start off and address the elephant in the room. Okay. Some of you guys kind of already know where I'm going. So for those of you in the back that can't see, this is facial hair. I didn't forget to wash my face this morning. Had a student walks in, "You look weird today." It's like, yeah, well, hey, you saw something, though, so you can see it at least. That's what I took away from it. But I had someone last service come up, was like, "I could do that when I was 10. And I'm like, oh, great, thank you, right? I get it. My dad couldn't grow it for a while at 30, I think is what he said, but watch this. Okay, so this series, we're talking about the way of change, right? This time of year, we like to push change in our lives, whether taking something away or adding something, like hair. See right there, it connects. But in all seriousness, that's the series that we're jumping into, and that's this time of year, whether it's something in our life that we want to do or change, or better habits or habits to get rid of, things along those lines. The key phrase we've been looking at and following along is this: the way of change is following the way of Jesus, practicing his presence in my life. And I would say that tagline is just as important in the focus of what we're talking about. We've been looking at their disciplines, practices, however you want to call them, but it's not about doing more to become and make ourselves better. That's not what this series is. It's not a self-help series. It's not what we're about here at Grace. Joel quoted Richard Foster, and this is how he puts it and kind of captures this idea. The practices allow us to place ourselves before God for him to transform us. We're not doing the actual heart transformation. God is. He's the one changing us. And these practices or disciplines, however you want to call them, that we're going through in this series, those help us just place ourselves before him. Right? And that's what we're going to be looking at. And today we're jumping into, I guess, our first one. And it's going to be community. Community as a discipline. And last week, Joel did an excellent job of kind of setting the stage of what this is going to look like for our series. He talked about the idea of willpower. Right? Willpower, and how we always try to just force ourselves to grow. Kind of that imagery he used of the tree, right? Where it's just like you don't usually walk by a tree and hear it struggling, like, grow more, right? But sometimes that's how we do that with life, is we're just like, I need to try this and do harder here, right? But he talks about John 15, where Jesus says, no, remain in me or abide in me. He says, hey, I'm the vine, you are the branches. And as the branches, we just focus on holding on to the vine. The fruit is just a natural outcome, right? And so that's kind of the focus of this idea of that tagline. Hey, we just get in God's presence, get in the presence of Jesus, and he'll transform us. This first one we're looking at is community. Now, I don't know what you guys think about when you hear community, but really lots of stuff kind of come to mind, and it really took me a little bit to wrestle through what we mean by this, especially as a discipline. But what maybe initially comes to mind is a bunch of different circles of community that you guys have, right? Maybe it's your neighborhood community. Like, I have these neighbors that I'm around, we're really close, maybe we gather regularly for whatever kind of party, right? You have this neighborhood community that you're in, or your gym community, for those of you that are still working out from your New Year's resolution, right? You're like, we have this community at the gym, or your school, whether it's through your kids and the families that you connect with, sports or online community, even gaming or Discord, whatever that looks like, your family or club sport, whatever it is that you're a part of, you have these separate communities that you're like, I do all these different things. Maybe some of you have several that aren't on that list, but that's what you think of when you think of community. And you're like, I do that. I got community down because I have actually probably too many communities, right? All these different commitments that you see. However, I want to challenge us this morning to not look at community like this, but instead look at it like a target, like this. Because really, our relationships are concentric circles around ourselves. And that's what I want us to see community as. And different resources and people have labeled these circles differently. We've mentioned them a little bit here before, but here's the labels we're going with today. So the outside one is exchange. Relationships that you just exchange things with, right? You see someone at the store, you exchange a quick conversation, or you see someone, maybe an acquaintance, and it's like, we just exchange information or words or resources or whatever. It's just a surface level of exchange, and it doesn't go deeper than that. It's just outside people, maybe strangers even can be even farther outside of that, right? There's that exchange level, not very deep. Next level is participation. It's kind of like a team idea where you're doing things together with someone. You're participating in the same vision, the same values. You're going in the same direction. You're partnering with other people. There's that next level of closeness. And then inside that, I'd say is friendship, right? Where you say, hey, yeah, they're my real friend, not the friend that we have on Facebook, right? Not that kind of friend. It's a little bit looser of a term, but the deep friend, real friend that you could say, yeah, I can count on that person. We hang out pretty regularly, or hey, yeah, we are together. I could say that's my friend. And then even closer, I say, is the circle of intimacy, right? A spouse would fall into this, but I would say we also need people in this circle that aren't our spouse in a way that they know us on the deepest level. Usually only a couple people fall in this circle because we can't have that level of intimacy with that many people to know us that well, but we only need a few people to have in our circle. But here's our problem. I feel like our relationships, when we either think of all those communities or whatever it looks like, they actually look like this. We're alone by ourselves in the center without the middle circles of intimacy and friendship. And really all of our relationships look at the exchange level. In this generation, we're the most connected, technology, social media, but we're also the most lonely. Just because we have connectivity, that's not the same as community. And that's why we think this is such a big value of ours here at Grace. It's right over here. It's the we share life together. Right? That's how we would say community is, sharing life together. Because we see so often in this culture that, yes, we're connected, but only an inch deep. And maybe that's what you think of when you hear community, and you're like, oh yeah, I do that, don't I? But I want to talk about this deeper meaning of community and really the levels that we should be having and can pursue here in our lives today. Study after study shows that the max amount of real relationships that we can have is between 100 and 150, right? And sometimes maybe a little more or less than that for some of us. But that's like real people that you know. You know their name, their life, you connect with them, you relate with them, all kinds of stuff like that. Yeah, how many of us, and I know several of you probably have hundreds, if not thousands of Instagram followers, Facebook friends, things along those lines. We're like, yeah, I know all these different people, right? We spread ourselves so thin in our life today. Further studies show that the more time we spend on social media links to how lonely we actually feel, which is ironic, right? The more we spend in those inch-deep relationships, the more lonely we actually feel. Now, just because correlation doesn't mean causation, there's still something there that is to be noticed. Have you guys ever gone on like a coffee date with a girlfriend or hanging out with a deep friend of yours, whether you're going bowling or just talking, whatever, you're connecting with them, which is just a close friend with you, you're like, yeah. You walk away from that, or I actually had this last week, got to connect with someone, got to talk with them. You walk away from that, and you're like, man, life's awesome. I love this person. Like, you're just so full of life walking away from that, and you're like, this is so good. Like, man, they were encouraging, and you're thinking of all this different stuff, and you're just like, man, that was awesome. I was able to connect with that person really well. I don't know about you guys, but I've never had that after looking at social media or Instagram or anything like that, right? If anything, it's the opposite. It's just almost more discouraging. There's something about being face-to-face with people. Yet we keep this idea and saying, oh, well, I'm too busy. I don't have time to talk to people like that on a deep level all the time. Yet on average, it's around 2 hours a day that we spend on social media. Yet what if we took that time, or even part of that time, social media isn't a bad thing, and used part of that time to connect with someone individually on a deeper level? Imagine how that would change our relationships. Imagine. A phrase that I like to help guide some of my decision processes as I have a family and we grow as a family. The phrase that I've heard a couple times and want to look to is this: a yes to someone or something is a no somewhere else. A yes to someone or something is a no somewhere else. And that's really easy. In our culture, we have so many things we can say yes to. Yet when we say yes to something, an activity, a project, or whatever, we're saying no to something else. No to using that time for. And when we fill it with an activity, then that's less time with our family or less time with these people in our lives. Whatever it is, although we want to think we'd do great if we got more time in the day, right? How many of you guys have thought that before? Like, if I just had more hours in the day, right? 30 hours, that'd be great. It's a nice even number, right? 30, but we would just fill up those hours too, right? And when we get to 30, we'd be like, we need more than 30, right? Even if we can magically make that happen, it wouldn't really work. But what we can do is be intentional about what we say yes to and what we say no to. And so that's why I think this idea of community in this sense is actually a discipline, because it takes intentionality, and it's easy for us to be connected, but not to actually be sharing life with people. And it's not something that's our natural increment either. So to kind of wrap our minds around this, I have this definition from Calhoun that kind of grasps this idea of community that we'll be talking about. Christian community exists when believers connect with each other in authentic, loving ways that encourage growth in Christ. They engage in transparent relationships that cultivate, celebrate, and make evident Christ's love for all the world. The idea here, and the concept we're getting at, is that it's really a sharing life, not just parts of your life, but a sharing of your entire life, especially Jesus. Especially Jesus. That's what makes it different from your other clubs or things that you have going on in your life. And what makes it deeper is that you're sharing it not just on a light level, but on a deep level with some people as well. And so there's two aspects of discipline, two, I guess, dimensions, if you will, that I want to explain. That I know we're doing a lot of explaining up front. This was challenging for me to wrap my mind around, so hopefully this helps you guys wrap your mind around where we're getting at with this. So first, there's this idea that it's community as a discipline. Community as a discipline, and that's what we're going to look about today. That's what we're going to dive into, that's what we're going to wrestle with, and we're going to walk away with, hey, how do we get in the presence of Jesus through this? What does this look like for us? But there's also this idea that Joel has been touching on already, disciplines in community. Disciplines in community. And that's where, if you guys haven't yet, grab one of those series guides on your way out, get in community, and do these practices, these disciplines, whatever you want to call it. Because you weren't meant to do this life alone, and that's what we're saying is important. Right? Paul actually calls the church the body of Christ. Right? You don't have thumbs all by themselves sticking over here. If you did, that'd be really weird, right? I don't know if you guys have seen Spy Kids, those thumb figures. That's not what the body looks like, obviously, because you need different parts of the body, right? And that's the same way with us. We need to be connected to each other. And the thing is, we react like a body does, whether in joy or in sadness. Like if you smash your thumb with a hammer, right? Your brain first sends signals up to your brain, right? And then maybe your eyes start to water, your mouth maybe opens a little bit, and you're just like, huh, and your thumb starts to throb as blood gets pumped there, right? And your brain's like, don't do that again, that was stupid, right? Your entire body reacts, and that's part of what it is to be a community, is you react when things are good and bad, but you're together is what importance. And that's why we do these disciplines in community. We're a body together. And obviously that's not solitude and silence. Like those things aren't literally done right with other people, or else they wouldn't be silent or solitude. But you do them and bring together what you've learned, you share what you're wrestling through, what's difficult, and you do that in community. So that's kind of this pushing idea of what we're challenging you guys to do. But we won't really talk about that and dig into that today. Instead, we're looking at community as a discipline, what that looks like. Okay? So there's that definition. There's what that looks like. And it's like, great, cool, I like it, it looks awesome. But we still don't jump into it, right? So why not? What keeps us, we're like, yeah, I want authentic relationships. I want to jump into that. That sounds great and fantastic. But why not? There's obviously lots of causes. It's going to be different for each person. But I think it maybe boils down to the similarity of the fear of vulnerability. The fear of vulnerability. Being scared, being known, scares us. There we go. Being known scares us. Admitting feelings and failures shames us. Somewhere we were taught that being open is a dangerous thing, so self-protection is the most important thing. And for some of us, maybe we were hurt by the church or hurt by people in the church. And so we think, well, following Jesus, it's not worth it if those people are like that. Or we think, I can follow Jesus on my own, right? I just need to stream in online on an online church and I'll be okay. I don't need to do this Jesus walk with anyone else, right? It's just me and Jesus. But there's something about this face-to-face thing that God has created and wired us for that we can't do church, we can't do community, we can't share life like that. The Hebrew word for face, panim, or however you say it, means not only face, but the presence or the wholeness of a person. It's the idea that the entire being of who you are, right, is conveyed, right, in this face-to-face aspect. We only need 5 facial muscles to survive. Okay, so one study I was looking at said. But we have 43 face muscles. Right? All these face muscles used to express what's going on the inside, to show the wholeness of our being, our presence, and who we are, what's going on inside, right? We've all been in that moment where it's like, oh no, my face is showing how nervous I am. And you're like, oh crap, no, right? Don't show what's going on inside, right? But that happens. But that's important in who we are and can't be captured unless we're in community. And the thing is, if you do walk into a church or a place that says, yes, we got it all together, we're all perfect people, we're fixed, and come hang out with us, we got it all together, I would run the other way, right? No one has it all together. If anything, we're a bunch of broken people getting together with a Savior that does the fixing, right? That's what we do together. And so that's why, yeah, broken people hurt people, sure, but we can also encourage each other, uplift each other, walk with each other, be with each other. So much more can happen in community that can't be done alone. So it comes down to this fear of vulnerability, and whether that's you or not, there's this challenging quote that I think just kind of mic drops it. And again, from Calhoun, here's what he says. Authenticity, interdependence, and being known come with a cost. But the alternative to paying the cost of living a one another life is to live cut from God. Seems pretty drastic. The cut from God aspect seems pretty serious, but whether or not you agree with this quote or not, there's still this desire and realization that, yes, we need to be in relationship, genuine, authentic relationships. And so the best question really to ask, and what we're going to answer today, is what do we learn from Jesus living in community? What did we see him do in community? And there's tons of different places to go. We could spend probably an entire series looking at this idea of community, what the church should look like, and all this different stuff. But as a discipline, what should this look like? We're going to be in John 13. It's on page 874 in the black Bibles, if you guys have those. They're in the back if you guys do need one. You can pull it up on your app. We'll also have it up on the screen for you guys as well. But that's where we're going to be, and we're going to pull out some things for us this morning. And so John is one of the Gospels, right? That tell the story of Jesus. It's one of 4. And so in these Gospels, it tells, hey, how does Jesus live? What does he do? What are his rhythms, his teachings? What is he doing in life? And so this story is unique, is because it's right before he goes to the cross and dies, right? What he came to do. And so in this passage, it records what's called the Last Supper. Maybe you see that title on some of your guys' pages as you guys flip there. The Last Supper, where he celebrates actually Passover and then institutes communion. Now, this is a big, thick passage with all sorts of great stuff with that kind of stuff in mind, which we won't be able to dig into today with all that stuff that's packed around this meal. But we're going to be looking at what he's doing here with the community of disciples. Okay, so we're going to skip around a little bit, read a little bit, jump around, but here's what it is. Let's go ahead and look at it, John 13:1. It was just before the Passover festival. Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. The evening meal was in progress, and the devil had already prompted Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power, and that he had come from God and was returning to God. So he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, and wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. And from here, Peter's floored. He's like, whoa, wait, what are you doing, right? Because we'll get into that cultural stuff here in a second. But he was like, you shouldn't be doing this. But then he's like, no, I need to do this. And they go back and forth for a little bit. And then eventually Jesus is like, hey, this is what I've done for you. So we'll jump over to verse 12, where he explains it. When he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. Do you understand what I have done for you? He asked them. You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. Very truly I tell you, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them. So, whether it's here or in other parts, I think the thing that we see Jesus do is Jesus shared his life. He shared his life. And I think he does it really in 2 ways. First, as the Trinity. That's who God is this all three persons in one that we really don't understand. But as Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, he's already in community. Right? As God, he's living in community, sharing his life with other people in a perfect way that we'll never be able to understand. Yet that's how he starts. And from there, I think this helps us understand the second part. On this earth, he also lives in community. So although he experienced perfect community, right, he's on earth, right, and he still chooses to live in community, which probably would have saved him a headache. He probably would have been fine by himself, right? He had to explain a whole lot to his disciples. His disciples messed up on a lot of things, missed the entire messages, then argued who was the greatest, right, and all this different stuff. He probably would have saved himself some things had he done it on his own. But he chose to live in communion, to share his life with people on earth for a reason. And I think when we look at those relationships, we see another target, right? That target that we mentioned earlier, and also a target to aim after for our lives. So here's the breakdown. Again, pretty clear. These aren't mine. I didn't make these up. There's a common thing to look at when you see the life of Jesus. Some of you guys maybe have seen these before, but let's break these down. First is the crowds, right? That's the people on the outside that had that exchange basis with him, right? They saw maybe some healings and miracles. Maybe they heard some teachings, right? And feeding the 5,000, you heard some of those, right? Sermon on the Mount, maybe different things where he just exchanges some things with them. But as we know and hear in the scriptures, not a lot of them end up following him. It remains a shallow relationship. They just exchange some things, but then they go on their way. Next level is the 72 and 120. Now this is, those numbers are from two different places. First, Luke 10 is where he sends out 72 disciples. Okay, so it says they send out 72, two by two, to go and do and implement all that he's been teaching. And so that's the first number. It's just this bigger group of people, kind of almost like a church size, right, of people that are following him that he sends out. The 120 is the people in the upper room after his resurrection ascension, but another number put on where the people are that are following him. It's like, hey, these are actual disciples of Jesus that are following him and committed. They're at that participation level, right? They share the values and the vision of what he's doing, and they're like, yes, let's do it. But there's also that closer circle, the one we probably know best, the 12, right? He would say, yeah, these are my friends, right? That's who's actually at this meal, right? Just these 12. And he's connected with them, and he does this on multiple occasions where he takes them aside and explains his teaching a little bit more. They're like, we don't get it, please explain. And he's like, okay, guys, okay, this is what I mean, right? Or he'll take them and do different things with them. With just the 12, they're a little bit closer, a group that he stays connected with a lot. Yet even closer, which some of us may not have known, there's a core three, Peter, James, and John. Right? And these guys experienced that intimacy with Jesus. He took them on a few occasions to do things and to help him with things that he didn't take anyone else on. There were intimate occasions. One was the transfiguration, where he shows them his glory. Another is actually soon after this in the garden, before he goes to be captured, actually. He's praying, and he's just really going through a lot of tough time right before it. And he calls these three, right? He has these three with him. That's showing that intimate relationship that he has with these people. And so there's the four really categories that we see in that. And so the next question, or at least the first question really, to ask ourselves is, who can you share your life with? Or who can you share your life with? I think we need to start there. Start thinking through those relationships, that target in your life. Maybe some of you already have all of those, and you're like, okay, start thinking through those people as we look to love and share our life with them this week. But some of you, maybe you don't have any of those. Maybe you are that first circle at the beginning, and all your relationships are pretty distant. And so start thinking that there's a good chance God's already placed them in your life. You just haven't realized that that's what they are there for, and good opportunity to connect with them on a deeper level. But some of us, maybe we also need to seek out those people to begin with. So in our context, right, maybe you're a guest this weekend. You're like, I've not really seen that depth of a relationship before. As Joel said, wherever he went, right, we actually have the Discovery coming up, which that was not planned, but it's a great on-ramp into connecting with people here and what's going on, and seeing and becoming a participator, not just an exchanger of what's going on. Maybe you are a regular and you're like, yeah, I'm a part of what we're doing here. I'm going the right way. I'm going the same way you guys are, right? And maybe you just need to jump in a group. Maybe you're missing that friendship level of connection. Maybe that's your next step. It could be a group here, it could be a group somewhere else, anywhere that has that Jesus sharing life aspect. Or maybe you are in a group, but you don't have those individual or intimate relationships. And that doesn't have to be a spouse. In fact, I encourage more than just a spouse in that circle, in the sense of another guy with a guy, to share on that relationship, a girl with girls, whether it's a mentor relationship, like they're mentoring you, peer relationship for accountability, or a disciple or someone you're pouring into, or just 2 or 3 other guys that you're sharpening with together. Opening up at an honest level that you don't always share with everyone. And that's the appropriate place to share it into. So what does it look like for you? Who can you share your life with this week if you need to jump into that? And who are in your circles? So Jesus shared his life. And in this passage, I think we can see 3 ways that he does that. 3 ways he shares his life. First is he loved. He loved. Of course, that's really broad. And I think he did it 3 specific ways here in this passage, in sharing his life with his disciples. First, patiently. He loved patiently. Passage starts by saying he loved them to the very end. It gives us this idea, one, not only that it foreshadows to his death, that he's going to love them to the end of his life, but also throughout their life with him, right? As we said, they kind of had some numbskull moves, right? Trying to argue who was the best of the disciples, or trying to say, hey, God, put us at your right hand in heaven, which was something they fully didn't understand, right? They were arguing over little tiny things and misunderstanding his clear messages at times, but he still loved them patiently through all of the difficult times that he had with them. He also loved them selflessly. That's the second way. He gave of himself, right? He focused on them and not himself. It wasn't selfish, which is the opposite of that. It was selfless, thinking less of himself. And finally, sacrificially, which is, I think, clear because from here he would go on to give up his life for his disciples and for the world. Giving up of himself. In chapter 15, a little bit later, he says, greater love has no one than this, to give up one's life for a friend. Right? He says this and goes and does it. Right? And now, obviously, we're not all to go die on a cross. That's what Jesus did for us. But in what way can we love people like this in our community, wherever we're at, whatever our sharing of life looks like in those different areas? Who can you love in this way? Are you holding a grudge against someone? You need to love them patiently, walk through with them and whatever they're wrestling with. Is there something that you can do to put them first, right? To not think selfishly, but selflessly? Or is there something you need to give up in order to love and be with them and share life with them in your community? The example of this that comes to mind for me was really a lot of you here at Grace have loved and cared for Grace and I and my family as we've come on board and been here for several years now. Several of you guys have been around and loved on us, cared for us, prayed for us, and encouraged us. So first, I'll thank you. But we got to experience that love of sharing life as a church firsthand here at Grace. And so I just want to thank you for those that have been a part of it, but that was such a clear picture in my mind of, hey, this is what we're supposed to look like. People just coming around and being like, hey, let's do this, right? Linking arms and walking forward, running forward after Jesus, with Jesus, and after the loss. And so that was a clear picture for me of what that looked like. Second, he shared a meal. So he loved and he shared a meal. And so there's a lot more with the actual meal that's going on here. And even, too, in the Jewish culture, this idea of this centered around a table idea. And we may be able to jump into that a little bit later in our series. But I think it's important that he actually shared a meal with them. And we see this actually all throughout the Gospels, him sharing meals with tax collectors and also people of the law and different things like that. It's kind of a big deal. And here's the thing. No matter what part of life we're in, we all need to eat, right? Whether we're rich or poor, whether we're older or younger, or whether we're a newer Christian or an older Christian, or if we have different political beliefs, we can still share a meal. Hit a little close to home to some people, I'm sorry. But the point is we can still share a meal no matter where we're at in our life, no matter what we're doing. We can still share a meal with someone because we all have to eat. Some of you guys are like, man, I'm already hungry. Can he just stop now? Okay, and I'll go get some lunch. But that's what we're going to do right after this is go eat food. And we can share a meal with anyone. And so that's the question to ask is who can you invite into your home to share a meal? Some of you guys are already fantastic at hospitality. And we would say it's actually gospitality, right? Showing the gospel through your hospitality. But some of you guys are fantastic at this, whether it's preparing a meal or just being great hosts, whatever it looked like. My wife and I are still learning how to do this, being a younger family as well, and having our own place to invite people into. Like, we're still figuring that out, but some of you guys are pros already and have had us in your house, and it's a great experience. But some of us, maybe it's a little more overwhelming. You're like, I don't like to cook. Like, it's official, okay? I don't like to cook, or whatever it is. I still think there's something that's a challenge to maybe look into. That's been a challenge for me. I'm not naturally good at cooking and stuff, just ask my wife. But I try, right? And I think it's important that we do. But maybe a first step for you, if that's too overwhelming, try going out to eat, right? Going out, being in a place that you can still share food together, and eventually bring that into the home, because there's something about being in a home that brings security and love and a sharingness that we can't any other way. My parents actually were fantastic at this, not just because they made great food, but because, which is a helpful part of it, but they were just so open and honest in letting people into their home. And so often it's people that don't have a place to call home that connect so well with that, or have a family or a good family. And I was blessed with two amazing parents that were able to open up their home for us and for other people. What spoke to me so much was that they always did it even when they didn't have a lot. And it was like, I don't really know if we're going to have enough food for everyone, but we're going to open the door and anyone's welcome. Like, it's an open place for people to come. And it's actually funny, for a time, we had a good group of us that were close friends. I don't even know how everyone was connected, family friends and personal friends. And then we also had some other family members that were kind of connected. And so together, we came a name for ourselves, okay? We're pretty creative. Friends and family, Fram. See what we did there? Yeah, okay. So we called ourselves Fram, and we were like, hey, yeah, because that's what we felt like, coming together. We were a family. They would open their home, my parents would, and we'd have food together on Sundays and just enjoy the time together. And some of those people didn't necessarily have great home lives to go to, or they felt the love there that was there. Maybe they did have a great home life. It was just like, hey, yeah, there's something about sharing a meal together and opening your home and letting people in. So what does that look like for you, right? To share and open your home that way. So finally, Jesus served, right? He served. And this is pretty clear with the foot washing that goes on for the bulk of this passage. And so we've looked at this before, and we go over this when we do foot washing here, when we do our communion services. But as we know, this really wasn't a thing that the leader was supposed to do. Foot washing was a regular practice for that culture. Because if we think back to it, right now we think, well, foot washing, I wouldn't wash someone's feet today. Like, you have shoes on, you're okay. But if you think about it, it was actually a courtesy that was needed done because they wore sandals, right? And they walked on dirt roads. What also walked on the dirt roads? Animals. And they didn't have porta potties. So, yeah, you get where I'm going there. And so they walked, and then their feet were disgusting, right? And so they come in, and it was just a courtesy as a host to provide usually a servant to wash their feet. And we actually see a lot of foot washing references in Scripture. And that's why it's like, whoa, wait, Jesus is doing this, not a servant, right? And that's why Peter was floored and like, whoa, wait, what's going on here? Jesus chose to serve them in this way. And to not only do it and set it as an example, but he also commanded them to do it. He said, hey, do this. Yes, wash feet, but also serve each other. Right? Do this because that's what I want you guys to live like, to love each other in this way. And so what does it look like for you then to serve people in your life? Not just, obviously, foot washing is an example of that, and also an example of what Christ has done for us, and a reminder of that, but serving, right, can be something else. It can be something you do, whether it's helping with a project, yard work, watching kids, making and taking a meal, you name it, right? Or maybe something you give, whether it's your knowledge, your experience, your abilities, your time even, just an ear. Sometimes we just need to be an ear to someone, to serve them in that way. Probably one of the most powerful experiences of foot washing for me was at my wedding. We did it in our ceremony, which is not convenient by any measure, but I think that's still intentional. And it's not only humbling, it's actually more humbling to have your feet washed by someone else. And I don't know how many of you have done it or partaked in it when we've done it here. But it's so humbling to have someone do that to you. And even more so when it's your bride on her wedding day in her white gown, and she's like struggling to get down there just to like, you're like, why? Like sitting there, I'm like, why did we do this? This is so like, uncomfortable for me. But it's like, no, that's what it's like. We're to outserve each other. And that was the picture that we wanted that we're going to be doing. And I get to see every day as my wife serves me and I try to serve her. And it's a great picture of marriage and all that stuff and what Christ has done for us as well. But when we serve other people, it really floors them, right? It shows them, hey, there's more to it than just this simple action. I'm doing it because I love you and ultimately because God loves me and wants me to love you. And there's something we can do about sharing our life when we serve other people or when we serve together as a group or as a friend or whatever it is. It speaks to us on different levels and a great part of sharing life with people. So those are the three different ways I think that we see Jesus sharing his life in this passage. Of course, there's plenty other ways that we see that and a lot more that we could dig into. But those are a couple ways to hopefully give you guys something to wrestle with, to grapple on, and to look at. But I want to end with this other question because it's easy to get these out of focus or think, okay, this is all I have to do. I have to do this. Let me do this, and we're good. But we forget that it comes back to being in the presence of Jesus. So before we even figure out who to share life with, if we're still figuring out, okay, which of my circles is which, or even like how we can share life with them this week, which I want to challenge us to do, we first have to ask this. Have you let him share his life with you? Have you let him share his life with you? Well, it starts first, if that's your first time sharing his life with you, and we would say that say yes to Jesus. Or maybe that's where you're at here. If you're a guest this morning and you're still wrestling with this Jesus stuff, we'd say you'd say yes to Jesus, and he gives you what his life has earned, right? He lived a life we couldn't live and died a death we did deserve. And yet, through that, when we say yes to him, which also means we say no, right? Say no to a life of sin, a life that we can't get ourselves out of. When we say yes to what he's done, he then gives us his righteousness so that when God looks at us, he says, yeah, I see a righteous son. I see a righteous son in my family that I want to welcome into my community, right? The community of God and who he is. So it starts maybe first by saying yes to Jesus for the first time. And if that's where you're at, that's where you need to start this morning. But also, we only need to be saved once, right? We only say yes to Jesus once, but we constantly go back to Jesus as the answer as well. And maybe you need to spend time with him first in community, right? Him and you, before you then go into your other community. Because here's the thing. God has given us an infinite desire for relationships. We all feel it. We all know it's there. And sometimes we try and satisfy that infinite desire with finite relationships, right? We're never going to be able to solve the emptiness that each other feel in our lives. God's placed an infinite size hole that only fits him. He's the relationship that can bring us ultimate satisfaction and peace and wholeness. Maybe some of us, that's our story, that we try to fill that hole in our life with other relationships of people. When really Jesus is the only one that fully fulfills us and gives us true oneness and community and sharing and enjoyment in him. And so I would challenge us with this line first, as we end, kind of going out. Let's first live in community with him and let that drive us into sharing life with others. As we go into this week and as you start thinking, okay, how can I share my life this week, as we see this as a discipline to get in the presence of Jesus first, get in his presence, be and share your life with him first, to then let that motivate you and to share life and love others. Pray with me.